Hello, welcome to Form and Function from Afar. We really appreciate you being here for the conference. I'm Andrew Hewitt, one of the instructors at Book Paper Thread, and I'll be the moderator for this session, which is Shawn Sheehy, a behind-the-scenes exploration of paper mechanisms. We're glad to have you be part of our three-day set of presentations and demonstrations by some of the most interesting and inspiring artists and craftspeople from our community. Form and Function from Afar was conceived late last year when all the conferences and events that normally take place were canceled due to the pandemic. We were missing interacting with our community and thought maybe 50 or 100 people might join us for an online get-together and sharing of techniques, resources, and ideas. We've been so excited to see how many of you, over 1,800 people now, registered for the conference and how many have been introducing themselves and their work in the portal, connecting with friends and colleagues, and making new connections. We hope you'll continue that through the next few days. I want to cover a few things about how this Zoom webinar will be run. This is slightly different than a Zoom meeting, which you might be more familiar with. Since we have a large audience, attendees will not be connected by video, but you can certainly ask questions and make comments. There are two avenues for that, the chat and the Q&A section, which you should see along the bottom of your screen. And we have assistants monitoring both. We will use the chat for sharing of links and other things that presenters mentioned during their talk. And the Q&A is where you can type in a question. We will either type a response there or the presenter might get a chance to answer that question. So remember, questions only for the presenter in the Q&A and comments and other types of sharing in the chat. While I'm getting started, why don't you go ahead and open up that chat window and tell us who you are and where you're coming here from. We'd love to see kind of the range of communities and places that people are here joining us. If you think of a question after the fact, there is space to post follow-up questions and continue the conversation in the conference website. Lastly, if you experience issues connecting or other technical trouble, don't despair. This session is being recorded and will be available first on our conference website, and later it'll be uploaded to Book Paper Thread's YouTube channel. So if you miss anything, you can circle back and rewatch any of these webinars. I'll introduce Shawn in a minute and hand it over to him, but first I want to acknowledge our sponsors who made it possible for us to offer this virtual conference to you all for free. We have 10 fabulous sponsors listed in our conference website that you can see here. Please check out what they're sharing in our virtual vendor fair and see what they have to offer by following the links to their websites. Don't forget that some of the sponsors are offering discounts for conference attendees, so be sure to check their listings in the vendor fair to get those. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Book Paper Thread. We're a collaboration of three, myself, Andrew Hewitt, Karen Hardy, and Linda Marshall. When all of our in-person teaching gigs were canceled or postponed last year, we realized that we had to change the way that we taught. We met regularly to share our ideas and resources on how best to do that remotely. We launched our first online workshops last August and have been growing our catalog of courses, learning how to do it better each time we teach. We cover a variety of topics in the book and paper arts and offer different styles of workshops, from pre-recorded sessions over 6 weeks to live weekend workshops. We hope you'll be interested in exploring a workshop with us sometime soon. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Shawn Sheehy has been teaching book arts courses and workshops since 2001. His broadsides and artist books editions have been collected by Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, University of Chicago, the Library of Congress, UCLA, Harvard, and many more. His pop-ups have been featured twice in both hand paper making and vintage magazines. Published by Candlewick Press, Sheehy has created 2 award-winning trade pop-up books, Welcome to the Neighborhood in 2015 and Beyond the Sixth Extinction in 2018. He holds an MFA in the book arts from Columbia College of Arts. Shawn, take it away.
All right. Hey, everybody. So delighted to be here. Thanks, Book, Paper, and Thread folks for inviting me to do this. This is a lovely way to spend a Thursday afternoon. So behind the scenes with paper mechanical structures. You know, a lot of the fun stuff that's going on with those structures is behind the page. We've got nice illustrations that are on the front and they get activated when you as an interactor are playing with them. But for us who are interested in you know, the workings of things, sometimes it's more interesting behind the page than it is in front of the page. So we're going to look at 3 models today. I'm going to build 3 models for you. And the first 2 models are fairly simple, and they are essentially illustrations of our 2 basic directions that a paper engineer can take in building a movable. The first of those is a simple wheel kind of structure, and the other is a pull. And one provides rotational movement, and the other provides linear movement. And then the third model that I'm going to show you kind of throws those 2 things together in a blender to see what might happen. Because ultimately, a lot of that is going on anyway. It's not just one pure thing or the other, but a combination. But before that, a little bit more about wheels. And Andrew, let's go to Spotlight Desktop. I am showing you here a book that was published by the Movable Book Society in 2004, Celebration of Pop-Up and Movable Books. And it is essentially a collection of facsimiles of older structures and just sort of reviewing some of the history of the scene. And what it does handily for me in my very ready copy is show you the ways historically we've sort of evolved in building wheel structures. I'm noticing I've got a little bit of a ghost down there. Okay, so in the cover of this book, we have a model of the volvelle that was created by Matthew Paris, who is credited by many by being one of the 2 sort of firsts. The other is Raymond Lowe, in paper engineering a structure into a book. And this is, you know, in the 1200s. And in our facsimile copy, they recreated what happened in the original copy, in that the wheel is sewn in with just a piece of thread. In this case, it's synthetic, but historically linen was used, just like in bookbinding. And so there's just a tiny little knot there that maybe you can see. Historical models often have a knot cap glued over the top. This one does not. Later, folks moved towards coiling up wire, and I have an image of this rather than an actual functioning model, because these are very fragile, and you know, whatever metal that was used, sometimes copper, sometimes iron, you know, it doesn't stand up over time super well. So there aren't a lot of these in existence that can even be seen. But it was a way to solve a problem, and it's how they did it for a while. Contemporarily, you know, we're using plastic rivets, as you can see in the facsimile model here. I'm going to flip it over, and it's from one of the Meggendorfer books. So I pull a tab, and you can see there's just a ton of things going on with the pull of one simple tab. And if I turn it to the back, you can see how all of that is going on by looking at it from the back. And that pile of nylon rivets, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it looks like. And the advantage of these little plastic rivets that we use now is that they're very slippery, and they help to reduce friction at those points. It makes them work better, and the structure lasts longer. So it's a good innovation. I am, in addition, going to show you, especially with this first model, just an example of a simple paper hub. And
Shawn,
yes.
can you repeat the title of that book? We had several questions about.
Sure can. Let me put it back underneath here. A celebration of pop-up and movable books. And I'm also noticing inconveniently that the sun has just come out in Chicago. Yay! After, I think, 11 days of snow. But it means I've got glare on my mat here. So holler if this continues and is annoying, and I'll jump up and I'll close the curtain. All right, so we're going to build a simple hub, and I have shared PDF patterns with the book paper thread folks. Quick note from book paper thread folks on how folks can access those patterns.
Yes, I'm adding the link to the chat now.
Super. I have cut them out already, just so you don't have to sit there and watch me wield a knife. I also used my my machine cutter, and I'm going to give you a quick sweep. So grab your Dramamine. There's my machine cutter over there. So that's what did all the cutting for me, which makes it quick and also very clean. So I get to look like I'm a professional here. So here's our model. And again, it's a basic wheel structure. So you can see the edge of the wheel here, and frequently in wheel structures, a little bit of that wheel is sticking out to the edge, and you can grab it so that you can activate the structure. I'm seeing all of those questions about cutters, and I'll circle back around to that at the end, Karen / Andrew / Linda, and remind me if I forget.
Okay.
And I'm also saying a note to close the curtain. So let me jump up and do that after I demonstrate this model. So I turn the wheel, and you can see that I've got a little arm now that's sticking up out of that slot, and it has a nice oscillating movement. And frequently with structures like this, you can't necessarily go in both directions, but in this one you can. So that makes for a kind of fun movement. And it's also nice in that it pushes image far beyond the edge of the folio, and that can be nicely dramatic. All right, let me talk about cutters while I'm closing the curtains. Let's do a twofer here. So I have what is known, is made by the Graph Tech company, and we call them technically a plotter cutter. And plotter cutter means that it can both cut and it can draw, or it could score, depending on what kind of tool you have in the machine. And I almost exclusively use it to cut. So I've got a little blade in there. It's not a laser, it's a bladed cutter. And all right, that's better. And I bought mine maybe 15 years ago. And, you know, it's very affordable. I think I spent about $800 for it. And with the way that technology moves, I think you can actually get them for even less now. And it's not as fast and clean as a laser is. Yeah, that's going to do the trick. But it doesn't have some of the downsides that a laser has, like the scorching in the back and the need to vent that laser because it creates gases that you don't want to collect in your house. There we go. Let's do that. And it just, you know, it reduces the cutting of a thing from, you know, 20 minutes to 5 minutes. So it's super useful. And if you're interested, there's the sort of quasi-professional tool that I have, which has a bed size that's pretty close to the size of my mat. And there's a slightly smaller size that has been called a silhouette. I think now they've purchased the Cricut name, and so the Cricuts are kind of working on that format as well. And those models are even less. So it's very affordable. And even those smaller models, they have the same sort of functionality that mine has, which means that I can draw any shape that I want and cut any shape that I want very easily. And this machine is particularly appealing because it can talk to both Mac and PCs. Most of the platter cutters only work with PCs. All right, let's build. Let's build. So I've got all the cutting done. And in addition to the cutting, I also programmed my machine so that it would make little punch marks into the sheet, so that when I weed my pieces out from the matrix of the sheet, I can then line up my ruler against punch marks and score the sheet. And you're going to see me using my knife for scoring, which is preferred score technique for me. I just really like how the thickness of the material allows for that. I can make a nice mark in the sheet with my knife, and there's still plenty of material left over for stability. And it's a very precise point of scoring with the tip of that blade. You know, compare that with a stylus, and which I love to score with as well, but it's wider, it's not as specific. And I can adjust the pressure with a knife, and I can have a looser hinge or a tighter hinge depending. So it's great. It's great.
With a question, what paper are you using?
Excellent question. This white material that's going down right now is 110-pound index, and it's just the cheap stuff, you know, that I bought from Staples, and it's what I'm using to draft with all the time. It's what I use for workshops all the time, and you know, we know paper measure is crazy, so this 110-pound index is slightly lighter, thinner than the 80-pound cover that the color pieces have been cut from. The white is about 199 grams per square meter. The color stock is closer to 215 grams per square meter. So they're close enough, and they behave together super well. But it's a great weight because it folds very easily and makes an easy hinge, but it's got enough substance to hold itself upright, and structurally it works really well. So you're also going to see me going back and forth between tape and PVA as adhesive. I use a lot of 415, especially the 1/4-inch 415, because it's nice for long runs, you know, for just quick, clean tack, and it reduces moisture that I'm adding into the structure. And we all know that adding moisture is problematic, especially when grain comes into play. And when you're working in paper engineering, you really can't be too concerned about grain, because things get folded onto themselves in all kinds of different directions. You're invariably going to have crossing grain adhered together, and you have to deal with it. So the solution is minimize those points, minimize the moisture, and just control it that way. So here's our initial folio for this hub, this wheel. It has 3 panels because we actually need to trap some material in between 2 sides there. Here is the wheel, and our wheel has 2 sets of internal tabs. I've got these thick ones in the center that I'm going to push forward, and I've got thinner ones out here at the side, and I'm going to push those to the back. So in a paper hub, we're essentially pushing 2 tabs, and you'll see lots of different kind of shapes for these tabs, and some are better for locking, some are just simple like these are. There's a lot of variety there. And I'm going to simply slip those 2 tabs into this central hole in the folio. I'll flip it to the back and push those tabs down. And that's all there is to a paper hub. Super simple, very effective. And one of the things that we're careful about is the space between the tabs in the wheel and the hole that's in the folio. We want to have a fit that allows for very smooth and easy turning, but not so much space that we get a lot of wobble and shift. It's kind of like the pieces in the engine of your car. You want everything to fit together closely, but not tightly, and eliminate wobble and knock. So often, we need to back movable structures. We don't want these tabs to fly up and allow the wheel to slip out. And so sometimes in a mechanism like this, this would be the front side, and the image would be glued to these two tabs. And so you'd be turning this wheel and you'd be turning the image. In our case here, this is the back. So I have cut just an additional circle that I can use to glue onto these tabs and simply lock those tabs down. They can't fly out, they can stay flat, and that helps to improve function. Also, lots of times in a movable book, folios in the book are backed one to the next, because of course we know that's how books work. And so the back side of the subsequent page will back the mechanism, and sometimes that's sufficient to do the trick. So without the second piece here, I close the cover of the folio, and then I can grab the wheel and I can turn. And this space that's cut away so that it's easy to grab the wheel and turn it, we call that the bite. But we're making this structure just a tiny little bit extra fancy. We've got that oscillating arm here. So here's my piece for that. I'm going to give it a quick score long down the center. And then I need a quick score between the two circle parts here up at the top. And the two folds in this piece simply provide the opportunity to double over the material and help to increase its strength. It's one of the big things that you have to think about with mechanisms, is that they need a certain amount of strength, and especially with pull mechanisms, which we're going to see in a moment, you have to be able to grab them and yank, which is not so tricky, but then you also have to be able to push on them and make a structure go back to its rest position. And pushing on a tab requires a lot more rigid strength than the pull does. And I'll show you how to address that when I go to the next mechanism. So in this second hub location, I'm going to feed those tabs into the center hole on the arm. So it's that same hub structure, it's just a little smaller. I'm going to rotate that around and move the arm so that it's fit on the page, and then do a gentle close so that I can line up the oscillating arm into the slot while I'm closing. And then I have function. And obviously the slot that's here in the page is necessary for the function of this mechanism. If I didn't have that as a pivot point, now obviously the arm would just travel with the wheel and not do anything interesting, and actually it's fairly hazardous to its existence. But if I've got the slot in the page, it controls movement. And you'll see here with that second little hub, I did not glue a lock over the top of it, and I'm instead leaning on the idea of a second sheet over the top to hold those tabs down and keep the pieces locked together. So there's a hub with a little bit of extra fancy tacked onto it. Secondly, I'm going to show you a simple pull mechanism, and actually two variations of simple pulls. And the model here and the one that I'm going to build are going to be different colors, but no big deal. So if I grab the tab here at the tail of the folio, and again, there's a little bite cut in there, so it's easy to grab the tab. You can see these color fields just come into view in the windows. So that's what's going on in the front. When I flip it over to the back, it's like a big tuning fork here. And you can see I have two different approaches to setting up those pulls with their reveal on the front. So here's my pull mechanism. Do some scoring around the figure here.
Shawn, we have a question
Yeah.
from Ellen. Will you show us what these mechanisms look like in an actual page?
Beyond the models that I have built for you here, I don't have them in a actual illustrated something. It is all just technical stuff right here, right now. I do have some other things that I'm going to show you in a moment when I'm at the end here. All right, there we go. So you see that I did some folding here at the base of this strap. And what I'm doing right now is creating what we call a tube strap. So simple strap, and then add a little bit more to create a tube. So it's more than just the doubling over that I did with the arm in that hub mechanism that I just completed. Instead, I'm folding over from two sides and then joining those two top parts. And I'm not gluing or adhering all of the layers together. You can see that I can run my tool through the interior of this space. So there's air trapped inside. And having air trapped in the interior helps to increase its rigid strength rather than just the simple laminating of layers. But here at the bottom for the tube, I'm just gonna fold a piece over. Just a simple doubling, because that only has to hold up to the force of me grabbing it and yanking. All right, so that gets that piece ready. I'm gonna grab my folio, give it a little score on the back.
Shawn, we have a question about scoring. When you're scoring, are you using the sharp side of the knife or the back side?
I'm using the sharp side because that's the way I play, friends. But you can absolutely, go to any point in between the dull rounded end of a bone folder, which is also a great scoring tool, all the way down to the very thin, sharp edge that is my knife. And sometimes I recommend in workshops that people do use the duller side if they're doing it for the first time, just to practice, just to get comfortable with it. So there's the folio. You'll see that there's a bite out here to the side, which is not part of the mechanism that I'm building right now. But when I teach these models in the workshop format, and the folios get backed one to the next, this is where those two spaces line up so that it maintains that bite. So I'm going to flip this over to the back, and I'm going to take my mechanism here. I'm going to slip it into this slit that I have right above the bite. And you'll see that my slit down here has verticals on either side. It's got smile lines or frown lines, depending on how you're holding it. And it creates a flexible slit, which means that material will rise up a little bit when I'm pulling things through it, and it just helps to relieve some friction. Makes for easier pulling, smoother, less friction pulling. So I'm threaded through the slot. My pull is available down here by the bite. And then I'm going to take my simple strap that's on the right, and weave it through the two flexible slits that are in the page. And I did it backwards. Pause.
Shawn, I have two materials related questions while you're doing. What is the weight of the paper, and how many years is the double-sided tape good for?
This is the 110-pound index. So as an 8.5 by 11 sheet, it's right around 12 grams. I am not a material scientist, and no one has been around long enough to know how long the double stick tape will last. So that's an exciting thing that conservators of the future will reveal. Folks in the biz use the 415 to not be quite so glib, because it is more trusted from folks who think about these things. For me, mechanically, it's really great. It offers a certain amount of repositionability, and the fact that it has a carrier. There's a little thin layer of adhesive on either side of an inert core. So it's basically a 3-layered material with and then with backing on top of that. And I like that this tape has a lot of substance to it, as opposed to the adhesive that gets dispensed, with those roller devices, which folks love too.
Related to that, what do you use to join pages back to back? Do you use that 3M tape to join pages back to back, like as you were showing earlier? Frequently,
yeah, because it's a long run, and it doesn't introduce moisture, and it's a nice narrow point of contact. Yeah, it works super well. So I've got this this additional little strap here that has 2 folds, which I've just broken over there. I didn't bother to score them because they're small. And we're using this little piece as what we call a sleeve. And a sleeve is a management device, because we need to control movement, just like I mentioned with that hub structure, where we need to coordinate the size of the tabs with the size of the hole, so that we've got controlled but not sloppy movement. This is a ball and socket version of that, I guess. We need to do the same things with lateral movement here. We need to minimize any feeling of wobbling, because that's going to introduce friction and it's going to mess up the works. We also need to control distance, how far you can pull it out and how far you can push it back in again. Because I don't want to grab this and pull it and then just yank it completely out of the page, of course. And I also want to make sure that when I push on it, it comes to a rest right when the bottom of the tab is flush with the tail of the page. So I use the slits in the page to help maintain that smooth linear movement. And then this device and the sleeve is also going to help to do that for the strap here that isn't woven into the page like the first one is, which I'll put together in a second. But then the other thing is that we have the shape of this strap arranged so that this bottom edge is serving as a stop. So I pull and that bottom edge hits the flexible slit and it can't go any further. And when I go in the other direction, this edge hits the flexible slit and it can't go any further. So the slot is introduced sort of incidentally just by making those choices in the structure. All right, so to create some control on my second simple strap over here, I'm going to take my sleeve, just put a little bit of glue on these tabs here. Wrap the tabs behind the simple strap. Push it down, slide it down. So the sleeve is tacking down to the back of the page. It's not adhered to the strap. And so now it's providing control for that second strap. And it's hiding just out of sight above the window on the front. And then finally, we need to make this interesting. So I'm pulling the strap all the way down so it's in its fully actuated position. And then I've got a couple of chunks of color here that in this case today, I have cut from origami paper. Just because it's thin stock and it doesn't amplify the friction a lot. When I teach the workshop, I sometimes also have people use thicker stuff, and that works fine too, but it's nice to have something that's kind of thin. So gluing that into position when it's fully actuated. So now when I return to the rest position, that color field slides out of view. So there's that one. And then I'll do the same with the second. I have to be a little extra careful with moisture here for these because of course the origami paper is very thin and it's gonna wanna misbehave if it gets soggy. So I'm trying to keep the glue layer very thin too.
We've got a question. Why do you prefer to use your finger for gluing?
Oh, that's a good one. Because I hate to clean a glue brush, friends. Sometimes I will apply glue with a micro spatula, especially if I need to get it into a sneaky place. I think I waited just a little bit too long. That's good. And if I'm binding a book and I need to apply a lot of glue quickly, I absolutely will pull a brush out. But if I can just put a little dot of glue on my finger, wipe that down, crumble off the end of whatever's left over, I have a lot of control and I can keep things clean. And I don't have to wash out a glue brush. No. So there's our two simple pulls. One other note, super quick, about mechanics here. You'll see that there's a lot of strap that's sticking out beyond the points of reveal. And of course, that's where the color is hiding right now. But also I have to make sure that when I pull the strap out to its fully actuated position, that the ends of the straps are still trapped and not pulling out and flopping out so that they don't very easily find their way back through as I return to rest position. Lots of parameters to consider. All right, there's that one. And I know I'm going super fast. So yeah, and I've seen it in the chat there, the reminder, this is recorded, so you can go back and you can watch it at a slower pace maybe later if you'd like to.
You've got someone asking if you use a glue stick ever.
Almost never. They don't hold. They don't have the strength that I need them to have. Casually, folks use them all the time. Even not casually, you can use them and they're fine, but they're not dependable. And especially for the strength that I need on a regular basis. Even the good ones. I love PVA. I want to use PVA. And if my PVA is a little dried out, even better. Nice and sticky. All right, here's my third structure. Here's all my pieces, get them all scattered out here. Here's what we're building. So in this case, I kind of let all of the mechanics be on the front of the page. All the interesting stuff is on the front. Because what I wanted to simulate here was the sense of an articulated figure. You know, pulling a strap and having arms wave or wings wave or legs move, you know, something like that. So when I grab my pull on the tab for this structure, you're going to see these two little rectangles drop and they're pulling those green arms down with them. And we've got those little yellow buttons that are managing the movement. And in those little yellow buttons, I'm going to demo for you some sewn hubs. And in this case, I do have some knot caps on all of those points. I just learned this about knot caps in the Italian conference that's going on right now. So I'm saying it a lot. It's a new thing that I'm playing with. Though you're going to see in a moment that I'm not knotting the thread. I'm simply pulling the thread through and gluing it down and putting a cap on it because in the 21st century, we have PVA. So knots aren't quite so necessary because the glue is tough, the glue holds. All right, let me do some scoring here. Start with my folio, get my brain turned around so I'm looking at this the right way. I'm going to score for a few minutes, moderators. So great time to throw some extra questions out if you want.
Let's see, we've got a question from the beginning, the plastic rivets. Where can you buy those?
Oh, yeah. I don't use them myself. I like the sewn hubs and the paper hubs. I have some that were given to me a long time ago. And they were given to me because the person who bought them, MJ Linford, for those of you who know MJ, she bought some. I think they were sourced from somewhere in Europe. I'm on the wrong side. And she could only buy like 1,000 of them or something like that, you know, because they're solidly in the realm of industrial production. So they're not selling to the consumer, the casual consumer. Also, those little plastic hubs are heat activated to get the fronts and backs to join together. And I've never done it. I've never done it. So I don't know a huge amount about it beyond the fact that they exist and they work really well. And it's yeah.
A few more questions. Someone's asking, it says Italian conference going on now. What conference?
The Italian conference, pop-app.com. It started on Tuesday. It ends tomorrow. It spent a chunk of time yesterday in conservation. Today it was kind of talking about pedagogy and the use of movable structures there. There's one more round tomorrow, but yeah, pop-app.com, and you can look at the conference schedule. It's also free, so jump on in if you're interested.
I'm going to pop in and say that I think that they've been uploading them on YouTube as well, in case you missed the previous sessions.
Oh yeah, for sure. Thank you.
We've got a question. Why is the pull tab scored?
Why is the pull tab scored? Are we referring to this point right here?
Yes, I believe so.
Because if it's just down flat and your structure is down flat to a surface, it's just hard to get your finger underneath there to grab it. And if it's bent up just a tiny bit, it's really easy to pull and grab. So it's just for ease of use. All right, I'm gonna take the reins back again because we're ready to start putting this together. So I showed you two simple pull strategies with that previous mechanism. I'm going to show you a third one right now. And this third one we refer to as a self-guided slide, because all we're going to do is stick a couple of flaps through a slot in the folio, and it's going to manage both linear movement and torque. So all of the controls that we need are sort of completely integrated into the device in a very simple form. So it's elegant and it's quick. Its only downside is it requires a big slot down the middle of the page, but you know, there's worse things in the world. So I need to do one more quick tab, quick fold down here to set up our poll, get those scores in that we were just talking about. I took a kind of different approach to creating a tube for this structure as well. Rather than having it be one piece that wraps around in the pretty simple way that the previous mechanism did. In this case, I just have a second piece entirely that I'm going to add. Because having all of this extra business on our strap means that I don't have the kind of full material to wrap around and create that tube solidly and stably, you know, all the way down the length of that strap. All right, so I'm going to use tape for this one. I'm realizing that I'm about to get to the end of this roll, which is not a big deal because $4.15 gives you a bulk discount when you're buying it from Talus, which I definitely do. I'm just going to go ahead and use a short little bit here and not worry about it going all the way to the ends. So I think I'm buying at least 12 rolls of $4.15 at a time when I order it. And then just tacking this onto the back. Super careful about lining up the edges really cleanly. Building little paper machines means that accuracy is essential. Everything's got to fit together. Okay, so I've got a nice tube strap there. All of my flat business now needs to come to the center. Oh, I'm going to do one more gluing. got an initial tack for the first section of all 4 of these flaps.
Someone has asked if you're eyeballing your vertical cuts.
I'm, as opposed to pulling my knife along a straight edge.
I think the measurements, you're connecting, when you're laying your straight edge down, you're connecting cuts. Is that correct?
Oh, right. Like when I'm scoring,
Mm-hmm.
there are little puncture marks that that are just little tiny segments of line that I've created in the digital file. And then when I feed that into my machine, the machine cuts. And then when it hits those spots, it just goes chunk, chunk. And so I've got 2 indications for position based on what my machine has done. And then I'm just putting my ruler up against those 2 pokes. Because I'm not eyeballing anything right now. It's all very carefully measured and drawn. Because otherwise it won't work. It won't work. Not at this level of sophistication. And this isn't even that terribly sophisticated, quite frankly. I mean, it doesn't have, all of those pivot points that the Meggendorfer structure has, that I showed you at the beginning of all of this. Not even close. All right, so I'm feeding my pull through the flexible slit. I'm feeding all of my flaps through the slot in the page. Opening out the flaps on the front, which locks this piece into position. And then when I pull, it's just got a nice slide up and down. And then again, you can see these flaps will hit at the top and bottom of the slot to provide the stops, and we're all good. All right, we need some thread. So I am sewing together with the thread that I think I bought it from Colophon probably. So I'm using an 18/3 today, which means, it's pretty heavy. It's a pretty heavy thread. Linen is the thread of choice because it's very strong, and unlike cotton and some synthetics, it doesn't stretch. So it's the boss. It does the job. I just took a little bit of glue and I'm creating what I believe we refer to as an aglet on the end of my thread. Those little plastic caps they put on the end of a shoelace, which means that I won't need a needle. I just will make the thread rigid, and then I can poke it through holes really easily. And we'll start here, where I'm going to run thread through one of these little holes in the flap, glue it down, get some PVA underneath it, hold it snug in place, a little shorter, there we go. And then I'm going to glue up that whole surface. So I've got glue on both sides of the thread so it doesn't pull out. And then it's going to double over the flaps. And then the thread is trapped underneath. And this thread isn't going to see a lot of force. So there's not a great risk of it pulling apart anyway. But PVA is strong. PVA does the job. All right, I'm going to grab one of my arms here. Nope, I need to poke the end out. It's not completely cleanly cut. That's the downside of the plotter cutter. With tiny cuts, it doesn't always clear the space super well. But I wouldn't give it up. thread that arm onto my linen thread. Get a little bit of glue underneath it. Tack it down. Grab one of my caps, glue that up. Where are my tweezers? There are my tweezers. Actually, I need a little bit more glue there. Get a cap on it. Get some pressure. Make sure the thread is well trapped. Slice off the end of the thread, being careful just to cut the thread and not the stock underneath it. Oop, one more. There we go. Then thread through the hole in the folio out here to the side. Pull that thread through so I just have a little bit of a tail. I've got a little simple boring square cap here that I'm going to use on the back side because obviously it's not meant to be seen. Flip back to the front. Make sure I've got the right arm. I do. Okay. Thread into the slot.
Shawn,
Grab
does
one. Yep.
it matter if you used waxed or unwaxed linen thread?
I use unwaxed, and I've not ever used waxed. And I know that a lot of what is sold, like on Talus, especially what is sold as unwaxed, actually does have a little wax. They call it polished. I don't want wax to interfere with the thread's ability to absorb glue. And no one's going to see it, so I don't need it to be pretty. And one of the primary jobs, well, wax has two jobs. One job is to keep the thread from tangling up while you're sewing. And that's not an issue I have because I don't have long stretches of thread that I'm trying to wrangle. And also the wax makes that thread stickier and helps it to grip onto itself. And that's also not a concern for me. So yeah, this is just plain old boring, straight up linen. All right, there's my second button sewn.
We have another question related to that. How much tension are you putting on the thread as you glue it down?
Totally going back to that idea earlier, where I want things to be snug and not tight. I don't want it to go anywhere that I don't mean it to go, but I don't want to create additional friction. So when I am, and I'll do that a little more deliberately with this next one here.
And following up, the knot cap would literally be a small strategically placed knot holding the components in place, or particular knots typically used.
Ask that again, please.
She says, so historically, a knot cap would literally be a small strategically placed knot holding the components in place, where particular knots typically used.
The knot cap covers the knot, obviously, and protects it and helps hold it in place. It's often decorative. And I'm not sure about the sort of knot that is used. I haven't poked into that at all. But the knot, was more important when in an era when the adhesives weren't as strong as adhesives are now. I'm leaning on the adhesive to hold the thread in place and not a bulk of material. Right now, the cap is actually, providing a second adhesion point. So the cap is pretty important for helping to hold the thread in place. And I'm going to interrupt myself to talk about tension. So I'm pulling on the thread right now, and I have all of the slack pulled out for sure, but I'm not yanking on it. It's snug but not tight. Yeah. I need to get some glue on the button on the cap. There we go. But obviously here it's the caps, the whole assembly here is also hiding the thread end, obviously. So it's got an aesthetic job as well. All right, so I am, all that I have left for the demo is one more button, and I see that I am 2 minutes beyond my time. So do you want me to sew the last one, or do you want me to shut up and go home? He says as he just quietly.
I'm going to answer, go ahead. I say go ahead.
5 more minutes. It's only 5 more minutes. But we've hit probably a good portion of our questions already, right? So
we've got some more. Is this a good time to ask?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. We have a lot of questions about the software that you use to design your files for your cutter. So some general, what do you use? And then a more specific question, do you convert your PDF files for these mechanisms to .svg files for use in your plotting cutting machine, or does the PDF work? How do you manage all that?
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing about having a machine that works with an Apple, with a Mac platform. I use Illustrator, an Adobe product. So I subscribe to the Adobe suite. I also, I'm a graphic designer, so I'm working with InDesign and Photoshop and Acrobat and Bridge. It's all part of the daily thing. So Illustrator, because Illustrator is a vector-based file, and it draws, it draws lines, and that's what a vector is, drawing a line, and that's what makes up a pattern, lots of lines. I can send a file right out of Illustrator as an AI file to my cutter. So no conversion necessary. And I know that there are other drawing programs that are used, especially folks who have cutters because they're on a PC. I have taken my files to places where they need me to convert it to an SVG, but that's super rare for me. And I haven't done it in a long time.
Someone has asked if you make digital mock-ups.
Oh, kinda. And I was just going to say a flat no, but folks who were in my latest movables class would call me out on that. Because, and I'm done with this, by the way. That's the end of that. So if you want to jump back over to my face for Spotlight, unless someone asks a question and it means that I want to bring something over to show it. Face probably makes more sense at this point.
Shawn, do you want to turn on your camera again?
It is giving me a message saying that you have disabled it. So I would love to, but I can't.
Well, while he's figuring that out, maybe.
There we go.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. Oh. All right. Tell me again what the question was too.
I think you were in the process of answering one about whether or not you create digital mock-ups.
Right. No, because frequently for me, it's starting with, just building physical models, just like I did in front of you right now. So I'm just cutting things and putting them together and seeing how they work. And then ultimately things get converted through scanning and then drawing to become digital files. But I've been around the block enough times that lots of things are drawn already and are in my files, from 20 years of doing this. So if I'm building something like this, a lot of chunks of things I can just copy over from earlier files. And it's also not too difficult for some things that are like this to go straight to digital and just kind of draw all of the pieces. There's not as much uncertainty as comes with a pop-up, for example. But also, when I'm creating a digital file, and I was using the desktop would be easier, but I can do this too. I can, in Illustrator, I can set the center of a cap here, for example, as a rotation point, or actually it would make more sense to indicate this one. And then I can slide and rotate within Illustrator, so I can kind of watch and see how things are going to move, though not with 2 points like this has, just with a single point, more like this one. So, setting a point of rotation and then turning a thing and then seeing how it's going to behave, watching the digital pieces move against themselves. So it's a version of that, but it's not anything sophisticated or animated, and not in a kind of movie sort of building program. It's just manipulating the functions of Illustrator, basically.
Okay. Someone has asked if you can give us titles for each of the demo pieces.
Let's call this one War and Peace. No, again, too glib. Okay, so paper hub with an oscillating arm. And for any of you who maybe were at the Italian conference earlier today, there was a whole presentation about terminology, and it was a very academic presentation, and it was given by an Italian speaker who is tracking how English speakers versus French speakers versus Italian speakers are using words, which are frequently different because the languages are different. But then also within a language, all of the different terms that are applied to a thing, there hasn't been a lot of academic attention given to this. So there isn't a strong discipline for terminology. So I am saying these things to you, and that's what's coming out of my head, but someone else might say something different. But not dramatically different, not dramatically different. All right, so this is a simple pull. It doesn't operate as well when you're holding up in the air. It operates best when you're holding it down flat. So it's a simple pull, and it has a window side and it has a woven side. And then, this is just, talking about, thinking about articulation, a movable structure, combining linear movement with rotational movement to create different kinds of effects. And that is insanely inelegant. And I realize that. But it's also the thing too, once you start to invent, this is something that has come out of my head. I'm using foundational components, but I'm arranging them in my own new way. So, I guess at this point, it's my job and my chance to give it its own name, but I haven't, because it's not useful.
Okay, we have several questions about some of the equipment. I think earlier when we were showing your cutter, the camera wasn't showing it at that point. So can we circle back? And someone's asking what machine you recommend for printing and cutting. And let's see, we already covered the software.
Okay, so there's the cutter again, if you want to spotlight.
Yep. Is there a model number? Or we're getting lots of questions about this equipment.
I know. It's the GraphTech Robo Pro 2. And if you go to the GraphTech website, they don't sell this model anymore. This one's ancient. So giving you the number for this wouldn't be terribly useful. But if you look at, they only have one model. I think they've only ever produced one model that is the bed size that mine is. And if I were to pull out this carrier sheet, so here's a carrier sheet. Desktop is still spotlighted, right?
Yep, we can see that.
So here's the size of material that I can cut. This is a backing sheet that comes away, and then this is tacky underneath. So I am taking a piece of cardstock and I'm tacking it to this low tack surface, and then I can use a sheet that is as large as it's like 11 3/4 by 16 1/2. So if you look at the cutter that's on the GraphTech website that shows that carrier sheet size that's around 12 by 16 more or less, that's the one. And the other ones are industrial sized. So it's a 4-foot wide machine. It's not hard to sort out which is the one that you want. Yeah. We also could, if y'all want, I can grab that. I can grab that link and I can throw it somewhere useful for everyone.
It looks like some helpful attendee has put it in the chat for us.
Excellent. Thank you, helpful attendees.
Okay, we had a couple questions also about your camera setup. Yeah, so someone wrote, some of us will be needing to create videos for our own institutions. Your setup is one I'd like to steal. Do you have a, yeah, so.
Oh, it's so basic.
Anything you can share about that?
So I am talking at my iPad, and my document camera above my thumb is my phone. And again, if I unplug here, I'm plugged into a battery so I don't lose power over here. And again, take your motion sickness meds. So if I back out, I've got one lamp above for nighttime. I've got another can up high. I've got a third light that's clamped to my tripod. And so here's my tripod sitting next to the drafting table. And then I just have a mount on the top of the tripod. And I bought the mount, Amazon something. The tripod is from Home Depot. The cans are from Home Depot. And I don't ever use the clamping part of the mount up here. I just rest my phone on top of it. And it's great. And it's variable. So I can loosen here at the join. So I can raise or lower my mount if I need to. Usually it stays right about here. Super simple. And then I just log into Zoom with both devices, and I'm very careful that I am logged in with audio on my iPad where I'm talking, and the phone is not logged in with any audio at all. That's essential.
Great, thank you for sharing that. There was a lot of interest in that.
Yeah.
So we have quite a few more questions, and I'm going to try to triage some of these questions. I'm going to ask people, if possible, if we don't get to them, to ask them in the continued conversations area of our conference site. And when Andrew wraps up this talk, he will show you where that's going to happen. So just starting with the earliest question that hasn't been answered. Can you say more about your tweezers?
Walgreens, friends. Is my desktop or my face spotlighted right now?
Your face.
Okay. Walgreens, and it has a sweet little LED. And right now my battery has run out and I haven't replaced it, but there's a little button. So I can turn on this little tiny flashlight in my tweezers. But the fact that I haven't replaced the battery means that it's not something that I really need. I just like the fact that they're stainless and they've got nice little grippies and they're cheap from Walgreens, a budget store for folks who are not in the US.
Another tool related question. Someone writes, it looks like there's an etching needle next to your X-Acto knife. Can you identify that tool for us?
Oh, welcome my friends to the beautiful world of Shanna Leno. Shanna, S-H-A-N-N-A, Leno, L-E-I-N-O. She makes jewelry, she makes tools. So this is something that Shanna makes. It's a stylus on one side and an awl on the other side. I love this tool. I was introduced to it actually just as recently as last year and fell in love. Someone was sitting next to me at PBI and I grabbed it and played with it. And I said, I must have one. They're not expensive. Have one, you'll enjoy it.
People are commenting in chat that they also love her tools, and we've got a link in there now too.
Super, yeah.
Can you recommend sources to learn more about paper engineering?
ShawnSheehy.com. That was shameless self-promotion. And in fact, all of these structures that I just built are part of a class that I teach called The Satisfaction of Movable Mechanisms. And I'm running it a number of times this spring. So take a look at ShawnSheehy.com and you're welcome to sign up anywhere, somewhere, doesn't matter, right?
Related to that, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Related to that, do you have a favorite book resource for pop-ups and their creation?
You bet I do. This is one of the things on the stack for the end for sharing. Let's go back to desktop real quick. So I've got sitting there Elements of Pop-Up. David Carter and Jim Diaz. It's been out for a couple of decades, but they keep printing it because it's very popular and it's very useful. Great because it actually has physical models in the book. So it tells you how to build it, and then it shows you what it looks like, and there's a lot of labeling and letters to help your way through it. The first half of this book is pop-ups, things that actuate when you turn the page. The second half of the book is movables, like I demoed for you, like literally this one. Things that actuate when you manipulate a wheel or a tab. All of the movable structures open out so that you can see the workings for them as well. Again, that's very close to one that I built for you. It's got a cam in there, but I didn't do the cam. And if you go to popupbooks.com, all of the patterns for the structures in this book are available online. You can download them. Though David's not maintaining his website super fastidiously, so don't wait if you want those patterns. And we had to kind of poke around a little bit to find them yesterday. And that's another thing, if someone wants to help me out right now and go to popupbooks.com and click around and get to the point where you can see the patterns. If not, I'll throw that link in an accessible place when we're done. David is working right now with Rostin Meyer to create the follow-up to this book called The Complexities of Pop-Up. It'll be published by Proposition Press, hopefully coming out late in the spring. The second big how-to is Duncan Birmingham's Pop-Up Design and Paper Mechanisms, Mechanics. So good. It doesn't have physical mechanisms in it, but it has great drawings and pictures. Duncan also has a YouTube channel where he has over 100 video demos. And they're really, really good too. So Duncan Birmingham is well worth your time.
Wonderful, thank you. We'll continue with questions until 2:30 Eastern time. Is that okay with you, Shawn?
You betcha.
Okay. We've got two questions related to your design. What brings you inspiration on your designs, and do they work the first time?
Never. No, this is a field that is ruled by trial and error. Always, always, and always. And even when something is close the first time around, it still requires a couple rounds of refinements to get it just right. What inspires me? Folks who are familiar with my books know that I like to work with ideas in the wild world. Okay, thank you, Alyssa. She just put that URL up there for the Carter Diaz patterns. Creatures from the wild world. And so I'm thinking about systems, I'm thinking about interrelationships, and then basically, building animals. And if I jump up over here for a second and grab one and bring it back over to you. Thinking about wild creatures, is interesting to me because, part of the fun in engineering is having something sculpturally look interesting and fun and impressive or scary, depending on how big your roach is. But also, there's a way, this book is slightly big to be shown under the camera here. But part of it also is the fun of knowing that things in the wild are animated, they move. And so if you can actuate a structure in a way that also recreates the movement of a natural creature, it helps. It just makes it that much more fun. So, people make pop-ups of tons of things, and it's always great. But this for me is what is the most interesting. And then also if I can think about, the politics of ecology and resource management and just a ton of different things that circulate around ecological issues, then it's a worthy thing for me to give my attention to. So that's why I like to play with creatures that live in the world.
Great, thank you. We've got a question. Do you plot out your own pieces for mass publication to be cut in the factory?
All right, so, I mostly work in artist books, which means that mostly I'm doing it all myself. So most of my cutting is being done by that little machine over there that we just talked about. For the 2 trade books that I worked on, I am absolutely establishing all of the mechanics, and I am sending them models, I am sending them patterns. But both of my books that were published by Candlewick does a lot of pop-up books, and they've got Greg. I think they still have Greg, I don't know. Greg is the guy who goes to Southeast Asia, or used to be Asia, and talks to people and helps them kind of get the production and assembly set up. But it's all based on the files that I send to him. Yeah, so it starts with me.
Great. What about printing and cutting? Do you have a machine that does both?
So here's how I avoid that, because I don't print. And in fact, the books that I have that have words in them that are letterpress printed, I've hired it out. My books are all built from cut paper. So just like the models that I was showing you this morning, using different colors of paper for the different parts, that kind of is helping to build image. And if I go back to the 6th extinction that I had out here a second ago, where the models in this book are all based completely on an artist book that I did first. And so you can see that all of the parts in this structure are all a different color, and all the colors are, essentially flat and simple. So even though this is a printed book, it's printed based on the fact that it was built out of colored paper that was scanned. So I build sculpture with different colors of paper rather than printing image.
And related to that, there's a question from Katie, who says, Shawn, you are mostly known/published for your pop-ups and making your own paper for them. Have you handmade paper for movables, or is your aesthetic mostly pop-ups?
So Katie gets to one of my biggest concerns for next year, because my next artist book, which I'm working on right now, is going to be more focused on movable structures than pop-up structures. And I really want it to be made out of handmade paper. But there's a lot of tooth to handmade paper. And, right now, movable structures, if I can pull out David Carter again, not only are they using those plastic rivets to reduce friction, they're also using coated paper. So all of this paper has a little slick plastic surface on it. So it really reduces the friction. And if I use a handmade sheet that's very toothy, it's really going to introduce a lot of friction. So I'm giving some very serious thought about how I'm going to address that. And I don't know what the solution is. Katie, if you have any suggestions, talk to me, girl. I want to hear it. I'm assuming that's Katie Smith, Katie Florida, right? Thank you.
Yes,
Katie.
that was Katie Smith. Okay, well, I think we are going to close questions. If you had one that wasn't answered, when Andrew wraps up, he'll mention where you can continue the conversation.
Great. And Shawn, do you want to give us your website one last time?
ShawnSheehy.com. So easy.
Well, there it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me.
Thanks for all the thank yous. Thanks for hosting me, y'all.
Great. Well, thanks, Shawn, again for a great presentation. That was a lot of fun and some really good information. Thank you all in the audience for participating in those great questions. It's great to have a conversation going on during these times. And we'd like to once again thank our sponsors for helping making this possible. We hope to see you in one of our classes at Book Paper Thread at some time in the future. If you want to follow us, you can follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, or you can join our email listserv on our website to get the latest news. We have a few classes that are coming up soon. Kakashibu and Washi with Linda Marshall, beginning February 27th. Books for Photographers and Printmakers with Andrew Hewitt, beginning March 3rd. And The Storage Book with Karen Hardy, beginning March 27th. Now, remember, you can find the recordings and any handouts, if you haven't found them already, in the webinar tabs on the conference website. So just go to the individual presenter, and then you'll find all the information there. And if you want to continue this discussion, asking questions, making comments, you can continue to do so at the conference website in the continued conversation area. Be sure to post your comments there, and we'll keep that open for a while so you guys can keep talking amongst yourselves. Now, the next presentation tonight at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time is Beth Shoemaker, talking about collect, catalog, collaborate, artist books in university collections. And she'll be talking about her work at Emory University in their artist book collection. And finally, I'd just like to finish up by mentioning that you'll be receiving an evaluation after the conference. And we'd love to hear your feedback about the content and the format of this conference. Thank you so much and have a good afternoon.